Critical thinking. Are you guilty of it? We sure hope so. That's where we were last episode. My name is Dan. I'm one of the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship in suburban Charlotte, North Carolina on Lake Norman. And I am with today Josh Brahm, who is our executive producer of LIFETalks. But also Josh is an expert at the Equal Rights Institute. In fact, he actually is the founder and president of it. And part of his day job, his real job, his full-time job, is engaging people in conversation about important matters, particularly related to the subject of life. Thanks, Josh, for what you do here at LIFETalks and for helping sharpen my iron many, many times. Last episode, we've been talking about some of the signs that we're not engaged in critical thinking. Where we left off last time was kind of this idea where we get engaged in groupthink, confirmation bias, this idea that any new ideas, new information are a threat not worthy of consideration. But what are some other areas of critical thinking that may be indicative of someone who's not engaging in it?
So I think everyone should learn their logical fallacies. I think this is really important, and there's a lot of really good resources online for this. There's a deck of cards you can get and use as a dinner game with your kids while you're watching the news or whatever. But I'll tell you, there's one of the most popular articles I've ever written. I did a series on logical fallacies, and the first was kind of explaining about it's important for you to know what they are. Spend some time studying, learn the logical fallacies because we make them all the time, and it's it's important for us to. You're only going to know not to do it if you know what it is. But if you want to go to the advanced level, for the people who are I already know how to do that, Josh, I already know all of them, here's the hard thing to do that I have been guilty of not doing a lot of times, which is explain to someone, help them to see that they are committing a logical fallacy without naming the fallacy. Because that comes across so obnoxious, philosopher and nerdy logic guy, and I've been guilty. I actually in a Facebook debate one time, or someone on our Facebook page, I actually in a bad moment told someone literally that they were committing the post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. And I feel so stupid now because here's the thing.
Yeah, but at the moment you felt really smart, didn't you?
I did. Of course I did. At the time. And I probably was trying to virtue signal a little bit that I'm a smart guy. Take me more seriously. But that's obnoxious because if you're using Latin, then you're either an ancient Roman or you're obnoxious. Come on.
And maybe both.
And what I could have done is what I could have said instead is, it seems like you're saying that because this thing happened after that other thing, that's always going to happen, or that those things are connected. I didn't have to use Latin to explain that or drop a link to the logical fallacy definition. And I've done that too. What is so much more persuasive and helpful to people and won't put them on the defensive is just don't use all the big words.
Yeah.
Put it all in.
Another Latin term that is part of that whole argument is ad hominem. And there are times, again, I'm just as guilty. I'm probably far more guilty of this than you are, where I like to pull out the few Latin words I do know.
And maybe in my head, I probably commit them a lot.
Yeah. But when someone goes personal on you, and they start questioning your character, your intellect, and so forth, calling you names, that's an ad hominem. I don't even know what it means in Latin.
Against the man.
Against the man, yeah. And so when someone does that, when I'm not thinking, I say, well, that's an ad hominem attack. You can get real with me. But I might say, hey, you know what? I think this conversation is kind of taking a personal turn.
I like that.
Yeah. So can we step back just a little bit and remember this? You're a good guy. You're really smart. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't be having a conversation with you. Yeah. Right. And I hope you know my heart on this is I'm trying to learn, and you're going to help me learn.
Yes.
So let's try to convert. And when you have that, you again. The thing that has destroyed our ability to have these good, meaningful conversations has been social media, because we all become these little keyboard warriors. I used to have so much fun. I'm not going to lie.
I know.
Just absolutely going on these anonymous post boards or bulletin boards and just cleaning clocks because I don't know. I love to twist phrases, and it's ungodly. I got to tell you, it's ungodly. It feeds pride. It doesn't represent the Spirit of Christ. I'm not proud of that.
This is proof of how much the Holy Spirit has worked in your life.
It really has. And I often, when I meet people that knew me from my 20s or 30s, I often start my conversation with, I hope you get to know me now at my age and not remember me for the way I was in those days.
Yeah.
And I've apologized to people because I was just not a pleasant person when I got into that mindset for sure.
So just to point out, twice in the last 2 minutes, Dan has used what we like to call at ERI internally open-mindedese. It's the kind of things that only open-minded people say. Where just the fact that you've changed that much from then is significant. But even before, when you're talking about when you're saying I want to tell someone I'm a learner, help me to learn things, I'm trying to figure stuff out. That is only something open-minded people say. That's open-mindedese. That's awesome.
Yeah. So that actually then the counter of that is this idea that you may not be engaging in critical thinking whenever you revert to this closed-mindedness. Yeah. Well, you're never going to change my mind, which we talked a little bit about last episode. Yeah. But this used to be actively taught theologically, or I won't say theologically, but it would be taught in a context of Christianity. I can remember my dad having a debate with somebody where he wanted to get this bumper sticker for his car. It said, "God said it, I believe it, that settles it." All right. So the debate came, and this is actually an example of critical thinking, where the other guy said, "That's not a biblical response." And my dad what are you talking about? And he goes, "It should be God said it, that settles it. Doesn't matter not whether you believe it." And so they got into this big old long conversation, But we were trying to out
fundamentalize each other. Yeah. Who can be more fundamental here?
Yeah, you can just absolutely drill yourself into concrete doing stuff like that.
I'm more presuppositional than you.
Exactly. So, and I'm not saying that God's word is not the ultimate authority, and that does settle it in heaven and in earth. But it's not a great debate tactic for sure. But when we refuse to consider the other person's argument with some respect of at least allowing them to express it, that may be an indicator that you have reached this point where you're no longer engaged in critical thinking. Therefore, your conversation it could become corrupted, but at the very least, it's unproductive.
Yeah, it's at least a red flag. There are occasions where I think this is okay. So there are times in my life when I'm, as far as trying to have good balance of my mental health and stuff, there are going to be times that I spend less time reading attack articles from the other side about my side or whatever. I think there are times where that's okay, but generally speaking, I feel if you are not at least once or twice a week in actually really reading or listening to people who are smart and on the other side, then you should be asking why. And I think it might have a lot to do with fear. Because I think that, I don't know, it's not new that political leaders are all trying to, move everybody through fear, but maybe it feels like it's even more now than it has been in a while. And so then, everyone, at the DNC and the RNC, all the arguments about why to not vote for the other side, it's it all has to do with fear-based arguments. And if you are so afraid to even hear what thoughtful people on the other side have to say about a topic, then it's a big red flag.
Yeah, huge red flag. And that's, I'd like to kind of shift us to another category of these indicators that we're not critically thinking in light of that, because I think it's so true. And I think probably you and I both have experienced from a certain segment this idea, and this sounds really arrogant, so I want to be careful how I say it. You're an avid reader, you're a thinker, you spend a lot of time on college, university campuses, you're thinking about the complex arguments. That's my world of academia. Avid reader. When you read a lot, your vocabulary expands. It's just a consequence. If you go to the gym a lot, your muscles expand. So if you read a lot, your vocabulary expands. And so we tend to fluidly use words that may not be common in other people's lexicon.
Yeah.
That being true, there is the other side of critical thinking. That begins with I'm not smart enough to engage you, or I don't need to be educated in this area because this is what I've always believed or been taught. One of my pet peeves, when I've had students pull this on me. It's kind of like, well, that's just what my church taught. That's what the preacher said.
Yeah.
That's it. And again, I have to be really careful that I don't over-respond to that in a condescending way that embarrasses or humiliates them, particularly if they're in a class, because I'm like, I want to roll my eyes so hard I have a convulsion when I hear people say that. But I think there are some signs that we need to be aware of. One of them is just simply accepting information without questioning.
One
of my professors in university had a huge impact on me. Used to say the active mind is the questioning mind. You ought to be constantly asking, what is the basis for that argument?
Yeah.
What is the historical context of this? What is the source of that research?
Yeah.
There's a family member that I love dearly, and I sleep in the same bed with them, who often in our conversations will say things, that I read today that, well, I'm pretty aware of what she's reading, and I'm going to bet it was Facebook. And so I immediately, if it came off Facebook, I'm just going to assume that it's not true, because I have a deconfirmation bias directed.
Was this a peer-reviewed article?
Exactly. And this just drives her nuts. And this shows how obnoxious it is to be married to Dan Burrell. Yeah. All the women there should thank God that my wife has not pitched me out on the street and made me available at some level. But
I feel you.
And also, I will say, who said? Where'd that come from? Where'd you read that?
Yeah.
And immediately she becomes very defensive about it because she knows what I'm up to. But in your mind, when you're reading Facebook, when you're listening to Fox News, when you're watching CNN, when you're reading Huffington Post or what's the Daily Wire, when you're reading those things, there ought to be going through your mind a dialogue that says, how do they know that? Where does that come from? What is the basis of that? And also be searching for information that would either support or that would undercut that, so that and that's rigorous.
Yes.
It's exhausting. That's uncomfortable. It is exhausting.
So uncomfortable.
Yeah, and you can take it to a point where you never believe anything.
Yes.
So at some point you are going to have to reach conclusions. But this notion of accepting information without questioning, simply because of its source, I think. Well, Fox News said. Well, Fox News, as we said last episode, spent $980 million trying to. And who was the person that was responsible for that? A guy by the name of Tucker Carlson, who we saw all over the Republican National Convention. And he's interviewed Putin, and he has a podcast, and he seems to be doing quite well on his own, but he literally lost his job because he was putting out on his show information that his own text messages showed that he did not believe, and he was doing it for the purpose of viewership. Now, once you find a pseudo-journalist, he was never really a journalist, who is pundit, that's the perfect word for it, who's doing that, it ought to call into question literally everything they've said or done. Yeah,
you don't listen to that person again.
They're done.
This happened for us with what's that really funny HBO weekly shows? The weekly every last week tonight with
I'm not familiar with that one at all.
Oh shit.
I don't subscribe.
With John Oliver. So this is it's like a weekly show. John Oliver is a very liberal commentator, and he's got like a weekly kind of commentator, and it's really funny. Of all the shows, this is like legitimately they make really interesting points, and they have these like kind of long video essay things that they do, and I enjoyed watching it a lot. I'd watch it often because it's like, oh, interesting points. And then he covered a topic that I knew well. He actually covered a colleague of mine. And while he had some legitimate kind of reasonable points, there was also some stuff that was legitimately not true. And I found out behind the scenes that they knew it was not true. The researcher had found out it was not true, and they still did it. And I'm like, man, I really enjoy listening to watching this. But I'm like, I can't go back to it because it's like as soon as you're willing, even for the humor or for the political point you're trying to make, if you're willing to lie or deceive at all, you're not a trustworthy source anymore.
Exactly. And some people are willing to give the benefit of doubt to that kind of behavior at the peril of their own accuracy and intellectual credibility, in my opinion. And we make excuses for people we like all the time. We're enablers.
Yes.
If the pundits of this country, the politicians, and most of the journalists would realize that they are going to be held accountable by an educated audience to the words they say and the promises they make, it would completely change the tenor of the information exchange that occurs on a daily basis on most of our airwaves. But
I mean, just to underline that point quickly before you move on, this is not original to me. I wish I remembered who said this, but I'll never forget. Is Christians especially need to be so much more careful about the conspiracy theories that we push, because for us, we're actually breaking the 10 Commandments when we do this. We are bearing false witness against our neighbor when we just repost stuff without fact checking that like tears someone down. Like we do this all the time, and it's not okay.
Yeah. Oh man, you got one.
Let's go.
Because social media, I have friends that do this. If you do this, shame on you, frankly. But I don't know for sure this is true, but I'm going to post it just in case it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
don't
my goodness.
you dare.
Yeah, I don't know for sure my best friend's having an affair, but just in case that is, perhaps we all ought to keep an eye on him. How would that go over?
Once you plant that seed, it takes hold. Yeah. Just watch the VeggieTales rumor thing. Like even kids are taught this. It doesn't even have to be deeper than that.
Yeah. Well, and if you start posting that kind of stuff, to me, nothing you post any further. I mean, it could have biblical references under it, and I'm just going to I don't know if I believe that anymore or not, because they post these conspiracy theories. Let me get it to another category of them that's kind of related to this. That's an over-reliance, and I'm even saying in some cases a reliance on intuition or gut. This is something I face in, and this hand in hand goes with this emotional reasoning.
Yeah.
So I get accused of this sometimes, of being almost emotionless in my pursuit of logic. And there is a danger that God created us with a dual system of fact and feeling, heart and head, those things. And all of us, I think if we're honest, and some of it depends on which part of our, which lobe, our right or left lobe fires more frequently or easily. Some of us, left brain, tend to be more logical. Right brain tend to be more creative, emotional. There are some indications that men tend to be more left brain than women. There are some indications that, artists are more right brain than mathematicians who tend to be more left brain. I don't understand the mystery of how God created all of that. But I think we all need to recognize that if you are more logically oriented, that feelings matter less for you, and you need to bear down and realize, feelings are part of how God created us. At the same time, if you're emotional, if you're artistic, if you're creative and so forth, you may need to anchor yourself more thoroughly to truth, because truth matters. Yeah. And feelings don't, in terms of absolutes, because feelings are subjective, and absolutes are objective, or truth is objective. So with that in mind, an over-reliance on, but I just feel this way. I think this. So when I was in graduate school, I'm going to use a swear word here as a quote, so if you'll excuse me in advance. I was writing my doctoral dissertation, and I wrote a couple of times, I think, and I think another, I believe, and I perhaps even put an I feel in there, which is one of the reasons why most academic circles, this was a certain section of the paper was okay to use first person, because if you're using third person, you're less likely to use those terms, but I was using first person in this paper. And my professor, who was a little Russian lady from Jacksonville, Florida, who taught for Nova Southeastern University in big red ink, because this is before computers and notations, she wrote, I don't give a DAMN exclamation point underlined 3 times what you think or feel. And that was a very direct way of correcting that, because in a dissertation the research drives everything, and boy, I went through and removed all the subjective terms. When it relates to truth arguments, we have to anchor our feelings to truth.
Yeah.
If you have an inclination toward feelings that feel very strong and feel very true to you, I think you have to be really, really careful.
Yeah.
So a good friend of mine, but he all his life is conservative. He's African American. No, he's not even. He's African Bahamian. He's not even an American citizen. But he told me one time, and I just love this guy. He's a great guy. He goes, man, if I'd been an American, I'd been pro Obama. I was just so excited to have a person that looks like me become the president of the United States. And he said, I was just so shocked that he wasn't protecting life and that he was doing this and he was doing that. And he kind of, I said, I just felt like he was going to be the right guy because he looked like me. And I didn't, I love this guy and I don't need to talk to politics by somebody who's not even an American citizen. But to me, that's indicative. And we see some of that today. I feel like it's just time that we have a person like this being there, or I feel like he speaks my language, or I feel like she looks like me. Either side of that.
Yeah, I think we're all doing this. We all want someone who looks and thinks like us. We want them to have the same theology. We want like everything.
And sometimes we're willing to believe a lie in order to reinforce that. And I'm going to get into it on this, but this notion that evangelical Christians are running around trying to convince other people that Donald Trump is a closet Christian or closet evangelical, it's just ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. And the sad thing I think about that is that unintentionally these people who are reinforcing that and so forth may be sending him a message that he's okay. That he's okay. And he himself has said, I've never repented of my sins because I've never done anything I need to repent for. Yeah. Those are his own words. I'm not making those up.
I saw that clip again recently,
so,
actually.
So the reality is, I've voted for non-believers many times. And if you're going to vote for a non-believer, you don't have to make your vote count more because you have convinced yourself he is a believer. We need to be honest. Move away from the feelings and at least be honest. Yeah. I'm setting aside my values on this, and this, so I can support this person because I see them as a matter of the lesser of two evils. Now, I strongly disagree with that argument, but at least you're honest about it.
Yeah. So here's like the slight nuance that I'll try to add to that because I basically agree. But is that, and this is where it gets really tricky, is that there is some value to intuition. That in the end of the day, like when we do philosophy, we are using thought experiments with people and trying to get them to think about what's in the end between these two ideas, which one makes the most sense. And in the end, after you get through enough arguments, in the end it kind of becomes a war of intuitions. And it's like what in the end makes the most sense of the world around us, given all of these intuitions. And so it's like there's value for intuition. It's like I want people to be in touch. Like if your conscience is being violated by something, like of course you should be paying attention to that. But usually I think people are paying way more attention to the emotions than the logic. And so this is where I think Jonathan Haidt talks about the example that I kind of resonate with. That's like everyone with their thoughts and feelings is kind of like someone riding an elephant, and it's like you think that you're controlling the elephant, and the elephant is the feelings, and it's like, and you're the logic, and you're like, oh, I'm so logical, and it's like you have no idea. As soon as that elephant is not with you, kind of can point you, if nothing else, by having you stop listening to the other side or whatever. And so we got to be careful how to balance both.
I agree fully, and that leads me to the last thing. And I know we're over time, so when we keep it really short, but this idea everything must be logical or everything must be emotional driven is black and white thinking.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we'll talk about I prefer to use binary thinking. There are more than two options.
Yes.
Not everything is black and white. There's a huge spectrum of gray.
Yep.
Not everything is neatly packaged. God knows I don't.
Yeah.
And so we have to move away from, often when I'm trying to solve problems and mediate with people and so forth, I'll say, let's look for a third way.
Yeah.
Now, theologically, I'm going to push for the black and white every single time because I think compromise in theology is the death knell of theology. But politically, relationally, we're all going to compromise every day. And sometimes conversationally, we need to understand that not everything is as clear to other people as it is to us. And other people, for a variety of reasons, the woman who has been raped is going to look at some things differently than I do. The man who was the man who who was beaten as a child by his father is going to look at things differently than I do because of ours. So we have to understand the world is not neatly packaged in black and white, right or wrong, up or down, north or south. And if you only think in those terms, you may feel really comfortable in the security of black and white thinking, but it's not the reality of how the real world functions and processes information. So, and with that, we are way out of time. Josh, has been fun. We're going to continue this conversation on another angle. And as always, we want to thank you for listening to us at Life Talks. Please tell your friends about us. Share us if you would on your social media feeds. Leave us a review if you would. And until next time, thanks for joining us here at Life Talks.